Hello, we're live. Hello, how are you? It is a cold January evening where I am. I'm in New Jersey. We've had snow today, and it feels like a good idea to spend some time together this evening. So, if you come across this while I'm chatting and you don't know who I am, my name is Linda Downey, and I am a transformational health coach and FEN, which is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, a whole life coach. I work with people, primarily women, but I work with people on healing the pain of their past, creating the life that they want to have by breaking patterns that have shown up. And tonight, I thought it would be a great idea, just because of some comments and messages I've gotten to recent posts in the last week or so, to really look at the way that we process our emotions and how that relates to how we communicate in relationships, and that both of those things are very related. And however you process your emotions and however you communicate have a root cause in common, a root, what do I want to say? Like a way that those things got formed, there's a common root base to those. So I'll go into that at the end. And my goal is that we're done in less than 30 minutes. This is posting in 5 different places. So I would love for you to say hello. Let me know where you are. As I said, I'm Linda Downey, I'm New Jersey, and you're somewhere warm. I would love to know where you are. And if I don't see your comments, because I won't see all 5 places, I can only see one while I'm in the live, but I will go back later and I'll make sure to answer any questions, because this seems to be a topic that people have a lot of interest in. I think that people really struggle sometimes in making their relationships, and it's not just a romantic relationship, although that certainly applies probably the most in romantic relationships when we look at these patterns, but it's sibling relationships. It's really, hey Trina, thanks for, oh, and you're in Florida. Thanks for saying hi. I don't know, Florida's a lot warmer right now or not. January can be iffy depending where you are. But it's your sibling relationships, it's your coworkers, it's your extended family. So the way that we relate to each other, and as human beings, hi Monica, thanks for saying hi. As human beings, we're all about relationship. We're all about how we are going through this life related to others. We get our sense of self from how we relate to others. And the flip of that is also true. How we relate to ourselves, our relationship with self, will determine how well all those other relationships thrive. Okay, so let's look at first the way that we process our emotions. So there are 6 different styles. So when I'm talking about these are both the emotional styles and communication styles are ways that aren't so great, ways that are dysfunctional, ways that keep us in conflict without moving forward, ways that keep us not connected in ways that we want to be. The way to really have what you want is to be comfortable with your emotions, to know how to process them, to feel free to share them, to be okay with being vulnerable, right? So if you're in that place, you're not going to have any of these defensive styles. And that means when you're communicating with somebody that you're in a relationship with, you're not going to fall into the different categories of communication styles either. The communication is going to be without judgment. The communication is going to be accepting, even if you don't agree, that you can be curious and accepting and listen to and hear the other person and then move forward in whatever has to be, communicated or resolved. So that's not going to happen if you're falling into either one of any of these categories, okay? So these are like dysfunctional. So the first ones let's look at is how we defend our emotions. So if you didn't get the tools to learn how to process your emotions, to learn how to be okay with emotions, if you have any kinds of thoughts like certain emotions are negative, it's bad to be angry, I'm uncomfortable when someone is sad, I don't want to feel like I'm being criticized, anything like that. These different emotional defense, it's called defense, right? Because we're defending rather than just being and allowing. So we're defending. So these 6 styles are going to be what show up in how you defend your emotions. Okay, and I'm just going to keep my notes here so I don't forget what I'm talking about. So the first one is avoidance. This is someone who stays really busy all the time, is always working, always taking on new things. It's just a way of avoiding actually having to deal with whatever it is they're feeling. So somebody who overworks, somebody who never rests. Hi, Alexander. Somebody who keeps themselves so busy, maybe taking care of other people, maybe hyperly busy in their own life, but it's all to avoid just the processing and of being. Okay, that's the first one. The second one is somebody who uses external things, external stimulants, in order to change their internal state. So instead of being like, oh, what am I feeling right now? I think I'm feeling upset. I feel really sad. This is making me feel left out. This is making me feel, whatever it might be, overwhelmed. Instead of being with that and checking in and then figuring out, okay, why am I feeling that way? What do I need to do? This person will just go to some external thing to numb out. So it could be food. So many people, and I've been in health and wellness my whole life since I was 18 years old. My master's is in exercise physiology. I've been in fitness and wellness, and in my own journey, have gone through different relationships with food and using food to, make myself feel better, or using food to get a sense of control, right? If I restrict myself with food, then I'm feeling in control. But what really needs to be dealt with, I'm not dealing with. So it could be food, so common for people, could be alcohol, could be sleep, could be sex, using any kind of external stimulus other than dealing with what they're actually feeling. Okay, the next one in there's 6 of these emotional defense styles, is analyzing. This is someone who probably when they were growing up were really rewarded and acknowledged for being more intellectual rather than for feeling. So maybe in the household, that was something that, just you got a lot of credit for if you could analyze things and problem solve. So that person is always up here, analyzing, thinking, figuring it out, and not dropping into their body and into their heart to feel what it is that they need to feel. So if you said to them, how do you feel about that? A response would probably be, well, I think that it'll be okay. No. What I asked was, how do you feel about that? But they don't really know how they feel or how to express it. So they go to what they think about it, and then, go from there, take that and run with it. So that's analyzing. The next one is blaming other people for how we feel. So she makes me feel guilty. Every time I talk to her, every time I get on the phone with my mother, she makes me feel guilty. People who have developed that kind of style around their emotions somewhere got the message probably that emotions are not okay and that certain emotions are shameful. So rather than feeling the shame about their emotions, they blame somebody else, because then it's not my fault why I feel that way. One of the most helpful things you can get in your life is recognizing no one makes us feel any way that we aren't in agreement with. We are 100% in charge of our emotions. And this is, I think, one of the biggest things that people are like, really? Because it feels like my emotions overtake me. It feels like I don't have any control. It feels like, It happens to me. And I get that because I used to feel that way as well, but it's not true. And clients that I work with, that's a huge place to get your power back, is when you start to own your emotions and how to move through them. So blaming anybody for how you feel is, a place where you're unwilling and hold shame probably, or a discomfort, or you think certain emotions are negative. Okay? The last emotional defense style that I want to talk about is called somatizing, or somatic, using your body, or because you're not, let me say it this way, because you're not processing your emotions and you're not comfortable with them, they have to go somewhere. So they go in the body. They get stored in the physical body. Emotions, if you've never heard this before, emotions are energy in motion. That's what emotion means, energy in motion. Motion means it's got to move. That's why it's important to process it. Oh, I'm feeling this. Why am I feeling sad right now? I'm feeling anger. Why am I feeling angry? What do I need to do about that anger? If you don't give yourself the opportunity to do that, a lot of people end up storing unprocessed, unresolved emotional experiences in their physical body. It's called somatizing. So people with chronic pain, headaches, pain in their lower back and hips, that's a big place where we store emotions in the back. And I just want to give you maybe some scientific background. If you're like, oh, I wonder if that's me. There's a lot of information out there about how emotions are stored in the body. So Dr. Sarno, I think Frank Sarno, I think he's passed away at this point, but he was an NYU doctor on staff at NYU, I believe in pain management. And he wrote one of the first books, I think in the 1970s, around how back pain was related to anger. And he was ridiculed by his colleagues and other people at NYU. And as research kept going on, he's now, people really agree with what he was saying at the time. So that's one book. The Body Keeps the Score is another book about how our past experiences that had a significant emotional impact that weren't processed is stored in the body. There's a lot of books out there if you're interested in really digging into that, by renowned experts in the field who recognize that. And what I can tell you is I have clients, I post sometimes client messages to me, or, when they put in their testimonials, how they had body pain, how they had symptoms, digestive issues, and they've cleared up. So when you start to learn how to safely do that, then the pain can leave. If there's no physical reason for why you have pain, right? You weren't in a car accident or something like that. You've just got this chronic pain that doesn't seem to go away with physical therapy or all the things that you might try. Okay, that's to me like a light bulb. Let me look, where else could this be coming from? Okay, so those were the 6 emotional defense styles. The ways that people will process their emotions, other than the most helpful way, which would be to be comfortable with them, to own them, to feel them, and to allow them to move through. Now, when you have one or more of those styles, it's going to impact how you communicate, right? It has to, because think about it. Think about today. Just go through your day in your head. At any given moment, somebody said something to you and you had a response about it. You had an emotional response. It might be if you felt criticized. It might be you felt like disrespected. It might be you say something to your kid and the way they answer, now you feel disrespected. It might be, you're out in the world and you're at the store and you're talking to the clerk, and the way that conversation goes. There's always a response. There's always a way that we feel. You're always in some emotional state while you're communicating, right? You'd have to be like a machine to not be. So how you process your emotions, those defense styles that I just talked about, are going to determine how you communicate. And they are, you'll see some crossover. You'll see how they're linked together. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 of these, okay? Styles of how you communicate. So now I want you to put your brain into your relationships. If you have a partner or ever had a partner, think about how the communication was. Think about how it is between you and your parents, or was if your parents are no longer around. How is it between you and your children, you and your siblings? All right, as I go through these. So the first one is, this is a style now of communicating. Invalidating what the other person is saying. So if somebody says, I feel really sad, I'm upset that this happened, invalidating, and it might even have good intentions, but we're just uncomfortable with sadness. So what we say is something like, oh, don't be silly, don't be sad about that. Why are you still worried about that? That happened 2 days ago. Oh, that still bothers you? Anything like that invalidates what they're saying. If we grew up in households that did that, we learn to stop saying how we feel, which then has us develop these styles, right? So it's like, okay, I guess I'm not going to say how I feel anymore because you're telling me I shouldn't feel that way. And it really, like I said, sometimes it's very good intentions. It's that you want to not have the person be sad anymore. You want to, help them move out of it. But here's the thing. If they don't have the opportunity to process it and express it, they can't move out of it. You're actually causing them to stay in it longer. So that's one way, one communication style is invalidating what somebody else says. Now, I just put a nicer spin on it. Sometimes it's a not so nice spin. Sometimes it's kind of ugly. Like, what the hell's the matter with you? Kind of spin to invalidate. And that can happen a lot in particularly, I think, partner relationships, because very quickly, and I'm speaking from experience, like speaking from my own marriage, which did not survive. So I know what I'm talking about. I know now, looking back, what my biggest contributors were to that marriage not lasting. And it was a lot of the power struggle, right? You don't have to put your hand up publicly, but in your head, power struggle. Who's going to be right? I mean, we used to not be able to talk about if there was sun or clouds in the sky without having to be right over the other person, invalidating what the other person said. By the way, that's just two people living in a hyperly stressed state, which I'm not going to get into in this conversation, but that's part of the problem. When your nervous system is so triggered on all the time, you are always grasping at, how do I get in control? How do I feel like I have power? And you do it to the other people in your life, okay? Another conversation though. Let's stick with the communication style. So the first one is invalidating. The second one is projecting. That's when you're talking to someone, or you say, let's say you have a concern, and their response back is, oh, you probably did that. So if you're like, I feel like you're not telling me something. Is there something that you're keeping from me, or you're not lying to me, are you? And they say, why, do you keep stuff from me all the time? They just flip it right back and project on back and avoid, really, it's a way of avoiding what the issue is. All of these are ways of avoiding the issue. Instead of having a healthy way to go after the issue together with a commitment to resolve it, it's all a way to avoid, okay? So that's projecting, taking the concern and flipping it right back on that person. If you say, I feel like you don't listen to me, they might say something back like, well, that's because you're never listening to me. Like it's always just a flip. Okay. The next one is scorekeeping. So a conversation starts, it's got some conflict to it. There's some issues. People aren't feeling wonderful about whatever's going on. And now instead of actually like, oh, what do you mean? Tell me more about what you're feeling. How can we move past that? Instead of that, what's going on is, yeah, well, the last 10 times I did something for you, you didn't even notice. Or how come I have to always ask you? I'm always the one asking. So it's a scorekeeping. It's bringing up all the things from the past. Again, it's a way to avoid what we're actually needing to talk about right now. So you might be dating somebody and, you don't ever call me. Well, I called you 5 times before you called me. Whatever it is, you get the point, right? So scorekeeping back and forth. The longer, if this is a style in a relationship and you've been together for a long time, you can bring up a lot. You can be bringing stuff up from 20 years ago. Somebody could say something and it goes all the way back to, well, back when we were dating, blah, 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 right? So scorekeeping, a way of avoiding the issue. The next one is shaming someone, which would have them develop a blaming emotional defense style. But shaming them or like teasing them, being derogatory, making jokes. So things like, what's the matter? Uh, you could say something like if a man was upset, what's the matter? Can't you be a man? Don't you have any balls? Something like that, right? Or let's think of something, uh, just really making fun of someone, shaming them for how they feel. And when we do that, like I said, it makes them now want to blame someone else because I don't want to be shamed for how I'm feeling, so I have to make it be somebody else's fault. Like if you grew up in a household like that, like, stop your crying. What's wrong with you? What are you, a pansy? I'll give you something to cry about. All of that kind of talk is shaming and derogatory. And kids growing up like that are going to not want to express their emotions. Would you? Right? So that's another way now that pattern has taken effect. And now as an adult, we are shaming others because we learn that, and we're also blaming in our communication styles. Okay, the next one is the silent treatment. So I've been in relationships with that where you just like really clear how unhappy you are with somebody by not saying a word. You make it really clear how much they messed up by your silence, by your not making eye contact, not using their name. If they do speak to you, not answering. Or if you answer, it's the barest minimal one-word answer. You don't look at them. Like it is very clear. You're icing them out. And the silent treatment can go on for days, especially as couples create these patterns of communication. It just becomes like they kind of know, okay, we're in the silent treatment now. Okay, they're invalidating me again. Like we just know that that's how it goes and we expect it. And it becomes this pattern that you both just ride out. But back to what I said at the very beginning, if you're in these patterns, first of all, they can be broken. It's not written in stone. It's just what's developed. And I'll talk in a minute about how and why. But also, it's a pattern that can be broken if you recognize that you're in it. So people think this is just how we are. And people think, well, this is how my spouse is. So what can I do if that's how they're going to be? What I do doesn't make a difference. Not true, because you're one half of the equation. So however you've been as the other half of that, when you start to change who you are, there's a ripple effect. They have to respond to the change in some way, shape, or form. It's like refusing to play the chess game anymore. When you get up from the table and you don't play the chess game anymore, and you say, I'm going to stand over here at the window, I'm not going to play chess with you, they have no choice because they can't keep playing chess by themselves, right? So I want you to keep that in mind. Like if you're thinking, oh, well, we've been doing this for 30 years, or it would make no difference. You can do a lot by healing your own past and by changing your patterns. There will be a ripple effect and some sort of change on the people around you and how they relate to you. When you start relating to yourself differently, they have to relate to you differently because you show up differently. Okay, so I just felt like I needed to point that out right in that moment. The next one, there's two more communication styles. The next one is avoidance. So just like similar to avoidance in the emotional defense, like I'm just not going to acknowledge my feelings. I'm going to shove them down. I'm not going to pay attention to them. I'm going to make believe it's okay. Doing that in communication with other people. We shove it under the rug. We don't deal with it. There's an elephant in the room, but we're all going to pretend that it's not really there. So that's a style that shows up in the relationships that people have. Okay. And then the last one is deflection, deflecting back onto somebody. It's a little bit different than projection. Projection, which was one of the earlier ones, was, oh, well, you're probably lying to me. You know, if somebody says something to you, you project it back. Deflection is more like, oh, you gave me no choice because you did that. I had to do this. So you've been nagging me for so long, I had no choice but to get out of the house. I can't take your nagging anymore, so I had to leave. So deflecting the fact that instead of discussing something, I left the house, took off, I deflect it back on, it's your fault because you nag me, instead of, owning and handling what the conflict is. So those are the 7 communication styles. Now, as I said, I wanted to tell you why or how both of those lists, how you defend your emotions or deal with them or don't deal with them, and how you communicate in relationships, both have at their core the same root cause in how those patterns get developed. And the root cause is how well your core needs were met and nurtured when we're young. So how well were you taken care of in certain areas? And this doesn't mean parents didn't love us. This doesn't mean that we had terrible, abusive upbringings. Maybe you did. Maybe a lot of people did. But it doesn't have to be. It could just be your parents didn't have the tools. I'm going to tell you what the needs are in just a second, but it could be your parents didn't have the tools. It could be that everybody was working, multiple jobs, and there were financial issues and people were under a lot of stress, and there wasn't the capacity to do what a child needs in order to not develop into these patterns. So for a child to develop a sense of self and the ability to feel their emotions and communicate them, and to have boundaries, and to be self-expressed, and to feel joy and all those things, it requires a certain environment, a certain way of being nurtured that honestly in our culture is not happening a heck of a lot. Look around at what you see. Look around at people and the level of stress, the competition, the anger, the judgment, the criticism. That all comes from a lack of feeling safe and nurtured for yourself. I don't know if you can see that right now, but it does. So these are the core needs that every human being needs in order to develop safely. All right. The first one is having a sense of identity and significance. Who I am is important. Who I am matters, that I get to develop a sense and an awareness of who I am. So being told, what's wrong with you? Get over it. Or children are seen and not heard. Or get out of my sight. I can't stand you right now. I taught you better. Don't you know better? I can't even look at you. Anything like that is going to make me feel like I'm not important, I'm not significant. It's going to damage my sense of identity. The second one is safety. So not only safety like in our physical body, that I'm not going to be abused, there's not, I'm not being hit every day, but also safety in being vulnerable, safety in being allowed to express myself. So if we're told, get over it, there's no safety in expressing myself. So I'm going to stop. And I'm going to start to find other ways to manage my emotions, like the ways we talked about at the beginning of the conversation. Okay. Autonomy. Did I have the freedom to choose what was best for myself? Or was I told, no, you're not going to do that. You're going to do this. This is what I expect you to do. You have to be a Girl Scout. You have to play sports, whatever it is that we're told. Or just things like, because I say so. I'm the adult, you're the kid. What I say is what goes. Stop asking. Anything like that. My own autonomy is not being developed. Okay. Variety and stimulation, that is nurturing the desire to learn different things, to be receptive to different things, to experience with a sense of openness. Otherwise, we're very closed. We're very mistrusting of anything different than us. We're just closed off outside of what we know to be safe, if we haven't had a sense of variety and stimulation being nurtured throughout our growing years. And the last one is growth, the willingness to see experiences and events as growth opportunities, not as failures, not as flaws, but, oh, this is how I'm going to learn. This is how I'm going to grow. I forgot one. This is a big one. Being loved unconditionally. This is probably the biggest one. Loved unconditionally for who you are, not for what you do, not for your accomplishments, not because you show up to the neighbors as the kid they wish they had, but for who you are. And not only that, you know it up here. I have so many clients who say, I know I was loved, but they never had the experience in their body. They never felt unconditional love, because it really wasn't unconditional. The parents loved them, but there were conditions around it. As long as, they didn't express emotions that were uncomfortable, as long as they didn't add stress into the household, things like that. So this conversation is specific to relationships. It's specific to how you manage your emotions through your body, and then how you communicate them in relationships. That is one piece of the work that we do, the work that I do with my clients. The Return to You program is in enrollment right now. It's going to close probably in about a week. And that program is all about returning you to you by releasing these patterns, by not living under the judgments, the critical voice in your head, the misperceptions about yourself. I didn't even talk tonight about the wounding, but when those core needs are not met, it creates core wounds. So if I'm 5 years old and, I'm being told children are seen and not heard, or let me say it differently. I'm 5 years old and my parents get a divorce. As a 5-year-old, I'm going to decide 100% of the time, because it's where we're at developmentally, I'm going to decide the divorce is my fault. A 5-year-old cannot understand anything outside of seeing everything in the world through themselves. They're very egocentric, right? So now, if my parents got divorced and it's my fault, and this is just one example, I must have done something wrong. And if I did something bad enough for one of my parents to leave, or even if the parent died, because a child can't get death, My mother died when I was 4 years old. You can't get death as a 4-year-old. All you really get is the impact of she's gone. And that impact leaves a wounding of abandonment. So these core needs and how well they were met are going to determine certain wounds that we then carry. Just because you grow up into an adult, just because you become a bigger body, doesn't mean those wounds heal. We carry them with us, and we carry the patterns that we created to deal with them at 5 years old. We're still using those patterns at 55 years old. I promise you. And if you look and you're honest with yourself, you see that too. So if you feel like this is the year for you to break your patterns, I want you to reach out to me, leave a comment. This is the time for us to have a conversation, okay? And if you have any questions or comments about any of the content for this live, I thank you for watching, whether you watch it now or in the replay later. And I look forward to connecting with you if you reach out, okay? If you're in my neck of the woods, stay warm. If you're anywhere else, have a good night, and I'll talk to you soon.